One of the most remarkable people I've gotten to meet lately is a woman named Amy Dixon. When she was 22 years old, she was headed on a path of becoming a pharmacist until lights started flashing and she found out that she had a rare disease that was going to make her eventually virtually 100% blind. Many people would give up, but Amy did not. She has now become one of the top para-triathletes in the country. Amy's illness has opened up a whole new world of experience and connection for her, and she's digging deep and finding skills she had no idea that she ever had, including the fact that she's now a U.S. Paralympian. Imagine that. Amy, I'm so glad to have you, and the fortitude, the strength that you have, the smile on your face with what you deal with every day. I just had to share it with Bottom Line people.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
When disaster strikes, you have two choices, right? Many people collapse. You didn't. So talk about how you dealt with that and what happened.
I was 22 years old. I was working my way through pharmacy school as a wine steward at a restaurant in Connecticut, and everything was flashing and strobing. One day I got home from work, I worked until midnight, I would go to class at 7:30 in the morning, and I really thought I was overtired, so I ignored it. It was kind of like when you look at the sun or a bright light and you look away for a moment and you see spots in front of your eyes and they disappear. So I literally thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me or fatigue. So because I waited so long to finally go to the doctor, a lot of the damage had already been done. And I didn't know that anything was wrong because I'd always had 20/20 vision, and I still have 20/20 vision in my right eye. It's through a very small hole at this point, so I only have 1% of 20/20 vision, and I'll explain that later. But at the time, I finally went to go see my neurologist because I suffered from migraines, and I knew that some people can get aura, or light flashing in front of their eyes when they have an oncoming headache. I didn't have a headache, but I had these lights, so I went to go get it checked out, and that's when he explained to me that something was going on, because he literally held his hand out to the side and asked me, "Hey, how many fingers am I holding up?" And I said, "That's funny, your arm's missing. It's like a black curtain." He immediately was panicked, and he says, "We're going right downstairs to the ophthalmologist. You need to get in right away. I think you've detached your retina." And of course, I had no health insurance being in the restaurant industry, so I was very averse to going to yet another specialist and spending another $400. And I said, yeah, that's great. I'll make the appointment. I'll go next week. And he knew me better than that. You know, he had been a starving college student once too. And he said, "No, we're going right now." And he marched me downstairs, canceled all of his appointment, and took me in there. And they looked in the back of my eyes, and the first thing they asked me is if I had been sick recently. And I thought, well, that's an odd question to ask somebody who's having some problems with their eyes. And they said, "Well, it appears that you have a lot of scar tissue in the back of your eye that's indicative of an autoimmune condition known as uveitis." And I had had a sinus infection during midterms, like a lot of kids do, as you get run down, and didn't think anything of it. And a few weeks later, that's when the symptoms started. So because I had waited to go to the doctor for 7 weeks, my peripheral vision was being erased very quickly, and I actually fell down the stairs and broke my ribs because I didn't realize that my depth perception was changing so rapidly that I would miss steps, and I broke my ribs. I couldn't understand that there was anything wrong with my eyes, and so I called the doctors crazy for coming up with such an insane diagnosis, and they said, "Well, you're going to be blind within the next year and there's nothing we can do for you," and sent me home. And obviously I was really not very impressed with that diagnosis, and I thought they were really full of it. I continued to go about my life as a college student and studying pharmacy and working in the wine business until I was having some really great difficulty driving at night, and I was really struggling in the restaurant. I couldn't see in the low lighting. I finally got prompted to go see a specialist in New York City, and that's when he confirmed the diagnosis and said that we can help slow down this disease by putting you on high doses of steroids. 16 years later, I still have 1% of my eyesight in one of my eyes.
So you said you waited 7 weeks from first symptoms. First symptoms being the sinus infection?
Strobing, the light strobing.
So the light strobing.
Yeah.
Did it continue once it strobed? Did it just do once, or it just kept going?
It kept going. It was intermittent in the beginning, and then it started happening more frequently to the point where I finally went to go see my neurologist.
And is this strobing, I'll call it unique strobing versus floaters and other kinds of flashing lights that people might get?
It's called photopsia. It's where light is literally flashing in front of your eyes. And it happens because the optic nerve and the retina are being damaged. Your retina is like a concave mirror on the back of your eye, and the light goes into this mirror and hits the mirror and reflects back out, and that's the image that you see. If you picture your eye being round and this being all of your peripheral vision, all above, next to you, and below you, if there's all this scar tissue covering the retina in that area, it is now blocking the light from ever hitting the retina or these pieces of scar tissue are diffracting the light all over. So your optic nerve is picking up pieces of light information, and so it doesn't know what to do with it, so it's sending these electrical impulses and causing this flashing.
Had this actually been coming on for a while?
Probably, but I don't think I noticed it until about 7 weeks prior.
Right, so it's not like you suddenly got uveitis.
I did. The preceding incident was a sinus infection.
Sinus infection, which then kicked off an autoimmune syndrome, which happens so often, that you get something happens, and then all of a sudden you have an autoimmune reaction. Yep. So the important lesson in this is...
Don't wait.
Don't wait.
Because I would still be driving. Honestly, I lost 70% of my sight within those first 7 weeks, and that was because I waited to go to the doctor. They could have saved my sight.
Now you have a horrible diagnosis. And now they're saying, goodbye pharmacy school, and that's really what your dream was. So how did you overcome that? There you were young. You were 22 years old.
I was really disappointed. Right. I was very angry, as you can imagine. I'm going to have emotions of grief and loss, like you know, losing a limb or losing a sense or losing a family member. It's all that process that you need to go through. But I'm very good when I'm angry. I turn that anger into action, and I think that's really the valuable lesson here is to use that energy, whether it's your sadness or it's your grief or it's your anger, channel that and use it for good, whether it's researching your disease, finding a good doctor, you know, putting yourself in the best possible outcome. And that's exactly what I did. I researched every doctor I could find. I tracked down the guy that discovered the disease down in New York City, and I really put myself in the best possible outcome for success.
Had you always been a fighter?
Yeah.
So it was easy for you. So it was natural, you know, because it's really interesting. I've watched some people very close to me that have some real big tragedies that have happened in their lives, and it's really hard to suddenly believe in yourself or suddenly, you know, get up and fight when life has thrown you a really big curveball.
It pays to have a good team, a support team. That's your spouse, that's your doctor, that's a close personal friend of yours, your kids. I was very fortunate that A, I had the support of my family, and B, I had a really good pediatrician. You know, I was 22 years old and I was still seeing the pediatrician, but I really loved him, and, you know, I would check in with him because I was in pharmacy school and he was very excited for me to be there. And so when this happened, he took it very personally, and he was determined to get me the best possible outcome with the disease, because he was almost as disappointed as I was, because I'd worked so hard and I was in the final stages of pharmacy school, that this was a major blow to my career, and I was sort of at a loss for what my next steps were, and what am I going to do with the rest of my life, and am I going to be a blind person? What does that look like? What does that entail? A lot of big questions. And so I just decided to get busy fighting the disease, and then to really sink the energy into something that I knew that I could do well. I was already doing well. I really enjoyed the wine industry. I was really passionate about it, and I thought, well, if what they're saying is true and I'm really going to be blind within the next year, I'll always have my nose in my palate, and I will always have a job. And I think that's really important, is knowing to adapt and being really realistic about what your options are and opening yourself up to opportunities. And for me, it was a horrible loss, but at the same time it opened up a whole world of opportunities.
And you actually use a phrase, ability from disability, that you like to talk about.
Yeah, I like to talk about ability beyond disability, because once you've got over that initial shock and loss, discovering what it is you're good at. You may not even know. And I don't care if you're 22 years old or you're 62 years old. It's finding what it is that you're passionate about or that you have an aptitude for, and then saying, okay, maybe I can't be a librarian or maybe I can't build model cars or whatever is my hobby, but what else am I good at?
Over the years, has your blindness almost worked to your advantage? Has your palate and your nose gotten better?
I think as you lose one sense, you are forced to use your others. I know that when you start losing your sight, you go through what's called mobility training with an instructor who is usually sponsored by the state to help you learn how to navigate intersections safely using your hearing rather than your sight. And so I never had to do that before, and I probably, if I had been forced to, I would probably be good at it. And now they literally said, okay, you're going to be blind, we're going to blindfold you, and we're going to teach you how to do this safely and to focus on your hearing and how to drown out, you know, white noise and things like that. And I don't think that my hearing got better. I think that I was forced to focus on it. And same thing with my palate. I think that, you know, it's sort of nice to drown out the visual of wine and really focus on what's going on in the glass. And for me, that's so fun.
It's interesting, actually, because the point of focus, you know, there's so much noise in all of our lives, all the time, the amount of constant stimulation and the ability to focus and the the forced opportunity to focus and take some of that noise out. It's amazing the power that you get when you focus. It's a lesson learned for all of life.
Right.
Like what happens when we really shut off distractions.
I know you're really a fan of meditation, and it really is sort of a forced meditation, focusing on my palate, because I do have to sort of drown out that white noise and all those other flavors and aromas that are going on in the room or wherever it is that I'm at. It's wrapping our head around and deciding that, okay, this door is closing for me, and grieving it as we do as human beings, but then saying, okay, what is the next? I'm not just good at being a software engineer for Microsoft, or I'm not just good at being a photographer. I have a girlfriend who has glaucoma who lives in the UK. She just finished her master's in fine art, and she's lost most of her sight within 2 years. And so she goes, but I just got an art degree. You know, I said, but there's something else that you're good at. I said, what makes you, other than art, what makes your heart sing? And so she's finding out what that is, and everybody has that. Nobody has just one thing.
It's a great lesson, and interestingly, if I can draw a parallel to so many people who, through the recent economy, have lost their jobs, and older people in particular who no longer necessarily have the opportunities in their past careers, and now they need to go create a new career. It really is a very similar
It's a very similar trajectory, and it really requires honesty with yourself and a letting go. You have to let go of what it is that you thought identified you. You know, for me, I was the buyer for a big chain of retail stores, and I had to, as I had more and more surgeries and I started going through chemotherapy to suppress my immune system for my eye disease, I had to wrap my head around that I wasn't able to work 70 hours a week anymore. It simply isn't going to work. I was trying, but the square peg round hole, I'm stubborn as a bull. But my doctor was the one who realized that it wasn't working and finally said, okay, listen, you're not helping yourself by doing this. She finally sat me down and said, there's something else that you're good at. It's not just this, or there's another way to do this. And it's allowing yourself to even be open to that possibility.
Which is so huge. And again, I think you were forced into it, but there are so many other people who are in very similar situations with a similar lesson to learn.
You have to learn to let go, and you have to recognize that there are other things that you are good at.
So you can't work 70 hours a week anymore.
Rats.
So what do? You become a triathlete.
Yeah, So then now I exercise 70 hours.
Are you kidding me? Like, where did you go from, let's take it a little bit
smart.
easy, and now suddenly you're an athlete? Explain that leap for me, please.
I was always athletic. We spent all day, every day in the summer in the pool, and by the time I was 5 years old, I ended up on the swim team, which I swam all through high school. And every summer from May until end of September, you could find me at the local pool just hanging out. That was my place to be. And eventually I dove and I played soccer and I played tennis, but swimming was always my release. And it's interesting now that, almost 20 years later that I'm going back to it.
So now you are on the U.S. Paralympic team as a triathlete, and they're watching you for the cycling team.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm being groomed for the USA cycling team. I have what's called a pilot. I ride a tandem bike where the two of us are on a bike. My pilot, her name is Lindsay Cook, and she's in charge of braking, steering, and shifting, and I ride on the back and I provide the power, or half of the power. We have been going to athlete development camps out in Colorado Springs at the Olympic Training Center, and the coaching staff really wants to see us make the team for this year or next year. Again, I rode horses. That was my other background was growing up. I grew up on a horse farm in Pound Ridge, New York, and so being in that almost prone sort of position on a bike is very similar to being on a horse. So my muscles have been trained that way for so many years. I'm just built to be on a bike, and I'm built to be on a horse. And so now to be able to, I can't really ride as much as I used to. I have an older horse. He's retired now and lives on a lovely farm in upstate Connecticut. But now I get my need for speed by riding on the back of a bike, which is so much fun. And talk about adapting. Honestly, the single hardest thing for me about losing my eyesight was giving up my driver's license at 32 years old. That was harder. Dealing with any surgery or any loss of my sight was the relinquishing my independence. Right. And for so many people, it doesn't matter if you're 20 years old or you're 80 years old, giving up your driver's license is really, really challenging. But being able to do this and ride a bike and have a partner to do it with is so exciting. So I get to have that adrenaline that I get from driving a car, but now I'm on a bike.
So now, you could have just exercised 30 minutes a day like I do. So how did you get from spinning class and swimming to suddenly becoming?
I had gained a lot of weight from steroids and the chemotherapy that I was on for a number of years. I was sick of my body. I was so tired and lethargic and just depressed because, I'd closed one door as far as being in wine retail. I could no longer work those kind of hours, and I was undergoing so many different medical procedures that it wasn't really physically possible for me to work. But I could, when I felt good enough, I could get to the gym. And I really didn't know where to start. And I remembered that I really like to swim. And I live across the street from a local YMCA. And I thought, well, there's something I could do without hurting myself.
Can't fall.
Can't fall. You can hit your head if you're not paying attention and you swim into the wall. But generally speaking, I could do it without assistance. And so literally, I brought my guide dog to the pool. I tied him up to the end of the lane, and I started swimming laps. And I lost the first 10 pounds of the weight in the pool just by doing lap swimming and aqua jogging. And then finally I would sneak upstairs to the spin room, and the spin class looked like so much fun, but I was too embarrassed to go in there because I was so heavy and out of shape. I was afraid that these women would look at me funny with my guide dog sitting there on a yoga mat while I could barely get through 10 minutes of a class. I was mortified to do that. So I would sneak in when nobody was in there, and I would do it by myself, and then I worked my way eventually up to an hour and took a real class. And then the final component was when I took a little bit more weight off and I felt comfortable running, I would try running on the treadmill holding onto the sides so I wouldn't fall, because I couldn't see the mill well enough to do it safely. And next thing you know, through the power of social media, a woman who specializes in guiding blind athletes for marathons, road races, and triathlons stepped up to the plate and said, hey, you're running, biking, and swimming indoors. How about we take it to the road? And I said, blind people can do that? It was so out of my wheelhouse that it didn't even register to me that was even a possibility. But again, being open to these possibilities showed me that, yeah, it is absolutely possible. And here we are 18 months later, and I'm on the U.S. triathlon team, U.S. para-triathlon team, and I'm heading to World Championships this week.
It's only been 18 months.
Yeah.
And you're not so young anymore, if I can comment
I
on
know.
your age.
There's a lot of fast young 20-years that are going to kick my butt in about 10 days.
But you keep winning. You won last week. You won your time trials last week.
Yeah, I won last
cycling.
weekend. I won a week ago. It's all moving in a positive direction. And, everybody says, what do you think of all this? And I said, well, there's a small window, realistically speaking, that you have a competitive athletic life. Closer to 40 than I am to 30. So reality says that this is sort of my one shot at the Olympics. The Olympics is going to be held in Rio in 2016. Could I do it when I'm 44? Sure. Do I want to do it when I'm 44? I don't know. We'll see what my body's tolerating at that point. But right now I seem to be in a really great position to make the team if I continue to make the improvements that I've been making each month and get improving on my times at each race and being competitive. Right now I'm ranked number 11 for blind athletes in the world, and I'm ranked number 2 in the United States. And this is a reality I never even dreamed of.
So what's the path from here to there?
Well, I am on the World Triathlon team right now for USA Para-Triathlon. The final team selection for Rio will be made closer to the Olympic Games summer of 2016. I believe the final selection will come down to whoever's earned the most points by spring of 2016.
So what is that going to entail?
A lot of racing to accumulate points in order to get there, because at the end of the day, whoever has the most points wins. They get to be on the team and they get to go to Rio. Unfortunately, and a lot of people don't know this, I didn't know this prior to being in the Paralympic pipeline, is that the United States is one of the only countries in the world that does not fund its athletes. It does not come from any government funding whatsoever. It comes from private donors and big corporations like McDonald's is a big sponsor, I believe Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola is huge for the Olympics. But it's up to ourselves to do the fundraising, and right now I'm on a borrowed bike. Which is lovely and wonderful. Was a very generous loan from somebody, but it does not fit me, so it's not ideal. And I'll be a lot faster when I'm on a bike that's fit to me properly. And again, that doesn't happen cheaply. Like a bike costs about $15,000 to compete at the elite level, at the Olympic level, and each race costs about $1,000 between entry fee and airfare, hotel. And now, because I'm a visually impaired athlete, I have to pay for 2. I have to pay for a guide who is going to travel with me, and she's going to be my eyes and ears on the course.
And that's amazing. I was just going to comment about the guide. Do you have to pay a salary to the guide as well, or you just have to pay all their expenses?
If I was independently wealthy, I absolutely would, because they're worth their weight in gold, because they are my guide dog for swimming, biking, and running for, you know, the distance of a triathlon. So they're essential to my success. I definitely want to pay their way for sure. If I could afford to pay them for their time off of work and things like that, that would be wonderful. But most of my guides are just very, very generous and wonderful people who take the time off and donate their time to me.
What does it cost to do, you know, I'll call it, you know, you went to Canada a couple weeks ago, you're going to be going again this weekend. What does the average trip cost you?
To fly me and my guide, if we both have to fly, I try to choose races where one of us doesn't have to hop on a plane, because it makes it much more financially acceptable. But between shipping the bike, getting on the plane, and the entry fees and hotel while we're there, you're looking at a minimum of $1,500 per race, which is pretty steep.
And then you're going to have to do how many races between now and then?
I'm heading to World Championships, and this will be my 6th race of the year. So yeah, that has not been an inexpensive season, and I have 3 more races after this. I have National Championships, which are in Tempe, Arizona. I've got the San Diego Triathlon Challenge with the Challenge Athlete Foundation, who's a big supporter of disabled athletes out in California. And I've got a few other veterans charity events that I'm doing as well.
What's the grand total dream amount of money that you need to raise between now and 2016?
Oh my goodness, I don't know if I could put a dollar amount on that. I mean, if you're looking at a bike that's going to cost $15,000, and if I'm going to average, say, 8 races a year,
Oh,
To 20.
$20,000, so $20,000 plus an additional, so $35,000 a year.
you've gotten involved in some other charities too in terms of giving back and being and
Yeah,
speaking, so that you actually do public speaking.
One of the best courses I ever took in my lifetime was the Dale Carnegie course, and so I'm very comfortable public speaking. And I teach wine classes as a sommelier, so I'm very comfortable in front of a large audience. So I do a lot of events. Guiding Eyes for the Blind, actually they're on my race kit here, are a huge supporter of me because they gave me a $50,000 dog for free. It costs $50,000 to breed and train a guide dog, and he is my eyes and ears, and he keeps me safe each and every day for the past 6 years. He's getting ready to retire shortly. So I feel very compelled to give back to them. I do a wine tasting fundraiser for them each year, and I also travel to Florida with the Director of Development every February, and we go and meet some of our very special, unique donors, and I do a few wine tastings down in Boca and in Tampa and places like that. And so it's important for me to give back to them for giving me the gift of independence. And then Challenge Athlete Foundation, I love speaking about Challenge Athlete Foundation because they support athletes worldwide with equipment grants. They gave me a $3,000 equipment grant this year towards my bike, which gets me part of the way there, not all the way there. I still have a lot of fundraising to do, but it was a big step in the right direction, and I'm so, so grateful. And they put on a lot of camps and clinics for the Boston bombing victims. All attended Challenge Athlete Foundation camps to learn about running prosthetics and getting active again after their amputations. And places like Team Red, White, and Blue, which is a veterans charity, and actually the triathlon director for Team Red, White, and Blue is the one that got me into the sport. She's the woman that told me that I could do this, and she said, I know a lot of blind athletes, it is totally possible, I will help you get there, and she's been true to her word. So I feel very, very compelled to give back to the veterans community, because while I haven't served in Afghanistan and Iraq, I think losing a limb or losing a sense like your sight or your hearing is a loss, and there's a certain sort of camaraderie that I feel with a lot of these guys that come back injured especially. And so being able to train with them, Team Red, White, and Blue helps veterans reintegrate into society through social and physical activity. So we have weekly workouts with these veterans, and it's so wonderful to see these guys that are really struggling with their jobs and getting back to society to get out there and go for a run with them and just talk about our stories and share. And it really is empowering. It makes you realize that, you know, you're very lucky to have a safe place to live like the United States because of these guys.
Now, and you have a blog.
I do.
That tracks and shares all your experiences.
I have a lot of funny blind chick moments where I walk into stuff every now and then, or a car runs over my cane when I'm walking down the sidewalk. Or my guide dog, you know, eats something awkward on a train, or all kinds of things that happen throughout my day, and I like to talk about it. And I also like to let people know through my blog that none of this has slowed me down. You know, I've lost 98% of my sight. I'm going to lose the rest, and that's certainty. I've developed glaucoma in addition to my uveitis, and so I'm losing the last of it to that. But I'm not afraid because I have a great community around me, and athletics is always going to be there for me. So knowing that has been really empowering.
So what's the name of your blog if anybody wanted to follow your story?
Yeah, it would be blindsommelier.wordpress.com, and you can have some funny blind chick moments and read what it's like to be in my shoes for a day, and be in the shoes of maybe you have a neighbor, or your mother is going through vision loss or going through Parkinson's, or any difficulty. I like to write about how you can overcome those things and how it's not the end of your world, it's just a different world.
So if somebody wanted you to do either a wine tasting event, to come public speak,
by all means, yeah, contact me through Facebook. I am a prolific poster on Facebook. I also have a page called Amy Dixon, the Blind Sommelier. You can message me on there. And I am doing several things for the World Glaucoma Association. I'm speaking at a conference, doing a wine tasting for them. I'm a member of the Lions Club, so I really love to get out there in the community and share my story and help people give back to their communities.
Well, I really think it's an enormous story. And again, we'll put all these links and URLs and everything on the website so that people can see it. But you know, you really, truly are a remarkable human, and it's, you know, it's so far beyond, I mean, having your tale of resilience, your tale of needing to change, if you know, the classic one door closed and another one opened up, and your quest for gold is just incredible. So thank you for sharing the time, and thank you for sharing yourself, that we get the chance to share you with the bottom line world.
Thank you for having us.